Have you ever looked back at a version of yourself and barely recognized the person staring back at you? A few weeks ago, I found a lot of the journals that I had written. Truthfully, I'd forgotten that they existed. I knew that they were there somewhere, but I found them. I opened them expecting to find memories, but what I found was a map of my fall. Page by page, entry by entry, I watched myself disappear. I watched a woman who was exhausted, overwhelmed, confused, and desperately trying to make sense of what was happening inside of her own mind. I watched someone crying for help without even knowing what to ask for. What shocked me was how bad things had really gotten. You know, it all seems pretty obvious now. The pain was right there in black and white. The fear was there, the hopelessness was there, and the loneliness was there. Yet, time after time, people told me I was attention seeking. They told me to snap out of it. They told me to think positively. What they didn't see was that I was fighting battles I couldn't even explain. And if I'm going to be totally honest, there were moments I wasn't sure how much longer I could make it. Today, I'm going to share parts of that journal with you. Not because I want sympathy, not because I want to relive the pain, because someone that might be listening right now might be where I was then. Someone may be feeling broken, alone, misunderstood, misdiagnosed, exhausted, over medicated, and have absolutely no idea what's going on in their life. And there's something I want you to know. You're not alone, because I was there. I lived it. These journals tell the story of my fall, the wrong turns, the labels that never fit, the medications that made everything worse, the moments I thought I would never find my way back, and ultimately how I rebuilt my life piece by piece. This is the story of losing sight of the sun and how I eventually found it again. I was going through a hard drive the other day that pretty much has my entire life on it. And I came across a folder called Writings. And I opened it up and I was surprised at how many of my writings were in there. And when I started to look through them, it was like a roadmap. Because I remember something that I had written or posted just a few weeks ago, I think. I was blown away at how bad things had gotten, how desperate I was. And, you know, looking back, it's hard for me to understand how I couldn't at that point ask anyone for help. But if you had the background that I have, that many of you have, of trauma, abuse, neglect, you can't ask because that was never permitted. So you keep it all in. And the only way I had to get it out was by writing. And when I was reading through it, I was like, oh my gosh, I can remember this piece. A lot of the pieces I really don't remember. But you know what? This is a really accurate timeline of my life from 2007 or 8 until the present. This one that I entitled Sea Turtles was written in 2007 after my father had died. And that's really when everything, I guess I felt safe enough to come apart. And I would go to bed at night and, you know, I really had no one to speak with. I didn't have a therapist. I didn't have anyone. I was so isolated and I felt so alone. And the only thing I could do was write. And when I wrote this piece called Sea Turtles, I was remembering a time snorkeling in Hawaii, and this big family of sea turtles just came up beside me. So that, I guess it had to have been in my mind, but I'm going to read this to you guys the best that I can. The water was so clear, so aqua, so warm and so salty. I dove beneath to swim with the great and majestic sea turtle. I felt my hair flowing behind me and water rushing over each inch of my body. I dove to depths I had never before experienced, chasing the elusive, graceful creatures. Their effortless, synchronized movements were mesmerizing. Their glances at me, piercing and all knowing. I was soon gliding more closely. They were just beyond my grasp. I knew I would soon be with them if I could push forth a little longer. My world was moving further away, and I was moving closer to theirs. I had to breathe. I could wait no longer. I took the salty water deep into my soul. It was warm. It was refreshing. It was liberating. It permeated every crevice of my lungs and circulated throughout my body. It filled me completely. I continued to take in the clear aqua water. It was so easy and natural, and so very welcome. Suddenly, my speed increased, and I found myself in the midst of the group. They had opened a portal to allow me in, and quickly they surrounded me. I was now one with them, one with the sea, and one with the turtles. There would be no return from that new and mysterious world. There were reefs to discover and waters to navigate. My freedom was complete. My prayers had been answered. I would not return. My home would be the sea, and my family, the graceful shelled creatures that had, in their wisdom, coaxed me to follow. Whoa. I remember writing this, and I remember that feeling. And this was written in 2007. It was before I had any sort of a diagnosis, a misdiagnosis, a correct diagnosis, anything. I wrote it even before I started having any physical physical symptoms, I guess, physical relief from what was going on. And this, reading this, it hurts, but it's also comforting because I can see that I'm not there anymore. So let's go on to the next one. Let me see. This next one, whoa, it it brought back a lot of memories when I read it. It's called Constraints. And the reason it brought back memories is this woman stole this from my writing and was going to read it at a poetry reading. And I had reposted it, or I wouldn't have known that she had taken my work. I had posted it again on Facebook way back. And she said, that's mine. I wrote it. I'm reading it at a poetry writing tonight. I'm like, hey, girlfriend, that is not yours. This is mine. I went back. I found the original one when it was dated. She said that hers was dated, I don't know, it was like years after I had written this. And in a way, it was a compliment because it meant something to someone. But in another way, it was like, how dare you take something from me when I have lost so much? But it's called Constraints. And I remember why I wrote this. My father had died, and I was really trying to come to terms with the very quick deaths of my mother and my father, and everything, falling apart, basically. But this one is called Constraints. Somewhere between consciousness and the darkest shadows of sleep lies a parallel universe where dreams and reality are melded into one. It's a place where we are not bound by earthly constraints, and our innermost fears and desires are lived out in the most amazing detail. We, as well as those that came before us and those who come after us, are free to enter and leave as we wish. It is to that alternate existence I find myself increasingly drawn. In that ethereal plane, most responsibilities and difficulties of life are released, and I'm free to discover the innermost truths and to follow the whims of my heart. Those are times I have grown to treasure, and my visits to this reality occur with greater frequency. Judgment is not passed, and assorted relationships can be explored without fear of discovery or retribution. It's during those precious few hours the connections that have been severed can once again be enjoyed, and those that have yet to form are brought to fruition. After hours of indulgence, I find myself reluctantly being pulled back to the bonds of this terrestrial plane. I am left only with vivid memories and cannot help but wonder of the authenticity of those times and if I alone participated. I had written this struggling to come to terms with the death of my father. This one is still pretty hard for me to read. I'm glad I have it because it shows me how really far down I was. This one is called Calm. And with some of these, I may have to get a little imaginative with my wording. I'm not really sure. I really tried not to be graphic when I was writing these. I remembered that, but some of these, they just flowed. And this was one of the nights. This one is dated in 2010, February 16th of 2010. Whew. I'm fighting the allure of what's become my escape. Maybe I shouldn't fight it, but give in and let it envelop me with its calm. I would slip beneath the foamy water and feel the heat cover every inch of my body, only to look down and see my long blonde tresses floating under bubbles mixed with crimson threads. I'd say that was pretty much, I think that pretty much, you get the picture there. Yeah, that was, um, my gosh, my cries for help. I didn't really realize they were cries for help at the time. Like I said, coming from my background, as many of you may understand with your own background, we didn't talk about things. My gosh, I didn't even know how my mom met my dad until my mother died. And I asked my dad one night after he had been, throwing a few back. My mother didn't tell me anything, and we weren't allowed to speak with my father because he had worked really hard. And when he was home, he was there to rest and get ready for the next 3-week trip he was off to. So we were never really allowed, or at least I was never allowed to really speak. I remember having to ask permission to speak with my father. When I think about this, and someone did get on to me about this, and I cannot really blame them because they were so far removed from what I was experiencing that to them I was like the same person, but I don't think they could really make out what I was speaking of with this. But the part about I would slip beneath the foamy water and feel the heat cover every inch of my body, only to look down and see my long blonde tresses floating under bubbles mixed with crimson threads. That was a constant that was a constant theme of my life. I wasn't I wasn't sure what it was. I didn't know what that feeling was. The only way I was able to describe it was I felt as if something was clawing at my back, and I was trying my best to get away from it. And not being able to identify what was going on was really, it was scary. It was really scary. And that kind of brings up the question of how often do we or others dismiss our pain because it doesn't look the way it's expected to look? I was expected to go on and care for a ton of kids and be okay, but I wasn't okay. I was losing it. I was afraid I was going to be following my parents. It was it was horrible. And that actually brings me to how I was diagnosed. I think this was in 2010. So this was after I got a diagnosis that I'll link that video in here. It was a misdiagnosis of a very trendy syndrome or disorder at the time, which was bipolar 2. They had me on these medications that really they numbed every inch of my body, and it, I remember going from one to another to another to another because nothing worked, because it was for the wrong diagnosis. It wasn't for complex PTSD, it was for something I didn't have, and nothing worked. And I really didn't think I was going to make it. You know, when I first was diagnosed with bipolar 2, the wrong diagnosis, I was relieved because I was like, oh my gosh, there's a name. Now I can fight the demon that is haunting me. But you know what? It just made it worse. You know, I think by the way I was raised, it was confusing. And it was really strange because I would reach out to people that were strangers, people online, people that didn't know me, because I didn't think I would be judged, or I wasn't judged by them. They understood what I was going through, where everyone in my life was like, just get over it. And that is one of the most aggravating things about having any type of mental disorder. But with complex post traumatic stress disorder, you don't just get over it because your brain is actually affected as you are a child going through this stuff. And then every relationship you jump into, it's like you're repeating your childhood and trying to fix it and gain approval. And it doesn't work that way. Okay, this one is dated. Let me see if I can find it. This one is dated February 18th. February seems to be a pretty popular month. February 18th of 2011. When I came across this, that I seem to have lost. Yeah, that's my life. I never know where I am. All right, this is titled Can Thinking Be Dangerous? And I know I'm going to skip around some. I'm trying to go chronologically. But there's a picture in here of this little, it was like a Beanie Baby kitten. And it was the weirdest thing because I think I had so much emotion that I had to transfer it, try to, well, yeah, with some of the things I did, I was trying to transfer that pain out of, you know, the mental pain into something that was tangible and physical. And then I picked up this kitten, and this is hard to read too because this was 2011, so I had to have been, well, duh, Terry, that's really kind of obvious. I was 49 when I wrote this. And this really took me by surprise, like I said, when I saw this kitten. Oh, I guess I should read this to you. This is when I started this blog on Blogger. I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 in 2008. However, years of therapy and treatment, my doctors, victims' assistants, and other officials have now convinced me that I don't have bipolar disorder, but rather complex post-traumatic stress. I am now closing old books and opening new ones. I'm embarking on a new journey. A new life awaits, and I'm ready for the adventures yet to come and seek out all the world has to offer. I'm on a mission to heal from my past and blaze new trails. The oppression ends, and with that, the real me can emerge. I don't know when I wrote that. It's not dated. It's just like under the About This blog. This had to have been, I must have changed this because there's no way I could have even seen that or felt that at this time. Friday, February 18th, 2011. I'm lying in bed thinking, watching NCIS, ordering some awesome sandals online, and holding my special cat. And which is weird because I don't even like cats. That's what Josiah, my little grandson, well, he's not a little grandson anymore. He's 20 years old, or he's going to be 20. That's what Josiah calls my little kitten. You see, I don't want anything happening to this cat. When Josiah plays with a kitten, he has to be very careful with it and put it back exactly where he found it. The cat's been with me for about wow, I didn't realize that. The cat has been with me for about 13 years, and it comes out of hiding when it gets really bad. This time around for about 3 weeks or so. I know it's weird, but I really don't give a crap. The way I look at it is that it's a pet that I don't have to feed or clean up after. It doesn't lie, it doesn't cheat, it doesn't steal, it doesn't destroy your home. I haven't written much about my struggles with my bipolar on this site lately because I had someone I love tell me that I was romanticizing my diagnosis. Not sure how you can romanticize dealing with a condition like I have. But hello, the name of my effing blog is The Bipolar Diva. It's not all rainbows and unicorns. And I really resent the fact that I even have to have a secret blog. Oh, I forgot about that. To let out the real me, good, bad, or indifferent. I don't like having to worry about what people think of me because that's not me. I'm confident in who I am, and I hate that that's been undermined. I had no confidence. I don't know what the heck I'm writing about. I didn't have any confidence in myself. I don't struggle with my disorder like many do. My gosh, I was in some pretty heavy denial because I was on all kinds of crappy medicines. I don't struggle with my disorder like many do. My case could be called bipolar light, and it's managed. I'm not psychotic and I'm not a lunatic. I'm barely borderline bipolar. I live a normal life in a normal neighborhood. I've never been hospitalized other than going to the ER after my parents died. Isaiah died, one of my other grandsons, and 2 grandbabies were born 3 months early, all in a short period of time. The biggest mountain I face with this disorder is that my moods can be up and down a little more than the typical person. But the diagnosis itself can throw wrenches into a few things. The biggest wrench is my medication. I felt so much better before I began taking it, and I'm thinking about stopping most of it. I made it for 45 years without being medicated. I think I can make it for 45 more. I want my life back. I want the side effects out of the way. I'm not so sure. As a matter of fact, I know that it's not my bipolar that has a grip on me now. I've had to make some major decisions lately that will affect not only my life, but the lives of those around me. And that's taken a lot out of my soul. I have no clue what I'm talking about there. 2011, I have no idea. It's left me exhausted and feeling alone, confused, not to mention scared and cautious about what lies ahead of me. By nature, I'm friendly, outgoing, and daring. Lately, I've become more withdrawn and wary. I don't like that. It's not me, and I don't want to live that way. I'm usually creative and fun, but that has been scarce. Probably another reason I haven't written that much on here lately. Why did I tell you all this? I have no idea. I guess I'm just processing and I'm tired of hiding. Whoa, there was a lot of desperation in that. And this, I should point out, was okay, what was it? February 2011. I didn't find my care team, my psychiatrist and therapist, until December of 2011. Man, that's just, that's scary. And what I really hate is that some of you probably feel the same way right now. You know, one thing that I've realized is having such a chaotic childhood and growing up the way a lot of us did. I'm assuming that you, if you're on this and listening, you grew up the same way I did pretty much. I lose things constantly. I can't keep track of anything. It's like my mind, I don't know what it is, but it's not fun. So I found my pen. This one is called Open Your Closet. Let me see if I can find it on here. Oh my gosh. I'd forgotten about this one. Okay, this is not the one I was thinking of. I'm going to have to go back on the blog and try and find that. But this is called Unorthodox. Just by reading the title, and scanning it. Oh my gosh, it's bringing back a lot of emotion, which is good because that means I can feel now. I'm not transferring my pain into something else. It's called unorthodox. Even in the midst of the fog, the vision was clear, unsettling, and necessary. Through the haze, I heard the call and followed the echo of my name that was being repeated in the heavy, thick air that I was surrounded with. Time had been suspended in those eternal minutes, and the distraction that followed was a welcome relief from the bombardment. Bombardment. Did I say that right? That just reminded me of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial when he kept saying, "Yes, you read that right. You continue to read it right. You read that very well." That was the funniest trial I think I've ever seen. It was great. Time had been suspended in those eternal minutes, and the distraction that followed was a welcome relief from the bombardment. The movements were smooth and deliberate. Emotion was numbed, and release was imminent. Seeing the effect of those carefully placed strokes was strangely calming, and the despair was banished. The cause and effect has been seared into my soul and will not fade from my memory. Although unorthodox in its delivery, the ethereal peace that flooded my mind and body was as life-giving as the crimson drops that fled the open wounds. The whirlwind that surrounded my being was for a time stifled. The world had stopped, and I was allowed to catch my breath. I'm left to contemplate the actions and the benefits and wonder if another time I shall surrender to its spell. I hate that I was even in that position, and I hate that I had no one to help me. Everyone was like, "You're being dramatic." It's like, no, I'm not being dramatic. I don't know what's going on here. This is really good evidence of a lot of things that happened during that time I have no memory of. I have no memory of this, which is probably a good thing. When I read of the tragedy, I wish I could say I was shocked, but I wasn't. The demons he fought were the same as I fight. I sat in the overflowing room where his friends and family had gathered to say their goodbyes, tell stories of his life and the way he had impacted theirs. And I knew how he had felt that day. For me, it's a way of life. Man, that's sad. My heart was with him. I know the struggle. I know how people think you're playing games and you should just snap out of it. The truth is, you can't. His enemy is my enemy. To those that are affected like me, my friend, our struggle is not a game and it's not attention seeking. It's all too real. For those that don't have a clue as to how we can struggle, as we do so often, bluntly get educated. Even though our fight seems invisible to you, it's in glaring technicolor to us. There are triggers that draw us into a vortex that seeks to destroy our lives. That doesn't mean we're weak. I don't know what my friends' triggers were, but I know mine all too well. A trigger is not a weakness. It's reality, and it's a landmine. My trigger is abandonment. Okay, I'm gonna cry. If I start crying, give me a Kleenex. My trigger was abandonment. Abandonment by people I have given my heart and soul to. There's strength in those sentences. I know what my trigger is. There's nothing weak about knowing your enemy. Your weakness or cruelty. Okay, so this was directed at someone, and I don't remember who it was directed toward. The weakness or cruelty lies within those that refuse to acknowledge there's a definite demon we fight. Luckily for me, there have only been a handful of people that knowingly or unknowingly triggered my falls. This last year has, without a doubt, been the most difficult year of my life, and my fight was to carry on. There's a very steep mountain to come that's scaring the heck out of me. At least this mountain wasn't thrown at me out of the blue. I still don't know if I can climb it or not. Only time will tell. That night at my friend's memorial service, I sat intensely watching and listening to his stepson speak, almost shout out his pain. Shamefully, I have to admit, it was the first time I had really heard, understood the impact on someone else. The first time I had seen from the bubble outside to the inside. His son gave me a gift, another point of view. People like to think what I fight, since it cannot be seen, is manipulative. And they make themselves focus and get angry as some people roll their eyes and scream in their feeble minds, drama. Stop and think. Do you really think for a moment that anyone would want to be afflicted with this disorder? One of the wisest things I've heard anyone say was from the mouth of a woman I despise. In an interview, she was asked, okay, I know who I'm talking about, not who I'm talking to, but I know what, this is just so confusing to me to look back on things that I had thought I had buried, and then I still have no idea of my friend. Okay, stop and think. Do you really think for a moment that anyone would want to be affected with this disorder? One of the wisest things I've heard anyone say was from a woman I despise. I just don't like the woman. In an interview, she was asked if she wanted her adopted children to be gay. Her answer was no. It's a hard life and a continual flight. I was speaking that I remember that interview. That was with Rosie O'Donnell. It's probably the only wise thing I've ever heard her say. I have to say she gained some respect from me that day. I guess my point is that wake up, look around. We all have battles. I may not totally understand yours, and you may not totally understand mine, but we need to understand that we are all fighting demons. Only some can't be seen. Be more kind, more gentle. You never know what someone else might be fighting. So before you cast stones, get angry and make assumptions, open your closet. What are you fighting? I'm going to read this next one. I hadn't had it pulled out, but it sounds like it might be appropriate. I think one thing that we've dealt with when we have been diagnosed, misdiagnosed, or dealing with any sort of a problem that is unseen to the outside world. You know, my son with autism, I used to throw a fit at school because he seemed normal to everyone. And I would ask him, what do you want me to do? Put a cast on his arm so you realize he has a disability? What do you want me to do? You need to realize what's happening here. So this has to be with something like that, and people that, okay, I'm just going to read it, okay? You can figure it out. It's one thing to have a mere suspicion regarding the spreading of flames of gossip and who you believe struck the match. But it's something else to have an actual hearer of the ill wishers' spoken words confirm the very suspicions you hoped weren't true, to intentionally breathe whispers of gossip into itching ears, with poison dripping from your tongue, with the sole purpose of isolating those you spoke ill of from others in their lives, is reprehensible. It loudly proclaims your character to those that have experienced people like you before, and to those with their eyes and hearts open. You chose your words of malice carefully and seductively. You uttered them to those you knew would ignite your smoldering accusations into a full fledged firestorm that, as you had hoped, would cause the destruction of relationships and leave the lives of the ones you spoke ill of in ashes. You did, however, make a mistake. You didn't count on some of the hearers of your actual words of venom to have more discernment than you had initially believed. They were fully aware of your words spoken with seemingly innocent eyes and a concerned appearance. And they realized exactly what your intent was. They saw your attempts to destroy, and they now look upon you with pity. They see you as someone so insecure that you had to maliciously try to tear down fellow humans to make yourself feel superior. I think I'm a little angry in this one. I'm sure you justified your actions for your own sake and made others think you simply had concern on your heart. After all, you had to be believed as you sat on your pedestal of piety. Yes, you succeeded with the ones that drooled as they anxiously awaited for ribbons of gossip to waft through the air. You succeeded with the ones that had little discernment and only had the desire to take any words, ill will spoken by others, embellish them, inflame them, and proceed to broadcast them to others that were happily waiting to follow suit. What you fail to acknowledge is that you, undoubtedly, have made many mistakes in your lifetime. We all have, and will continue to do so. Yet you judge as if you haven't once dipped your toes into the pool of sin and poison, as each and every one of us has done at one time or another. Some of us more than others, and some of us less. You put on the face that you've never held your head in disgrace, or that you've never disappointed another person, instead of reflecting on your own past and present misjudgments. You chose to focus on those of others and did your best to appear as the perfect human, one that has done no wrong, one that has no closet of skeletons, and one that will make no future mistakes, all while willfully attempting to malign others. One more thing you're forgetting is that karma, not my dog, karma will bite you in the back. But I think that's something you're familiar with. Don't have a clue. And that was written in 2008. Some of these are very inappropriate for me to read. This one is not dated, but it's called There's No Way of Knowing. Just as with waves crashing on the shores of a tropical beach, thoughts never cease. Some are clear and beautiful, others murky and painful. You can feel them, you can sense them. You know they're on the brink of coming ashore. There's no way of knowing if they will leave you refreshed and looking forward to the next wave, or if they will take parts of your heart, your soul, or perhaps your will with them as they recede to build strength for the next bombardment of clear water, whitecaps, and bits and pieces of sand mixed with other debris from the depths from which they've been pulled. There are other days the thoughts are calm, the ebb and flow are tolerable, sometimes quite relaxing. Other times they may very well be much more than expected, taking more than they give. It's during those times nothing can be experienced but the exhaustion of attempting to stay afloat and keep the irritants and scary creatures that have been wrenched from their hidden places at a distance that leaves room for breathing. Examination of the thoughts during those times is nothing that is possible, for those are times that survival is key. As with waves, thoughts never cease converging one with another. It's only the intensity that changes. The day could have been sunny and bright, and still a force of its own that, if not carefully navigated, will pull you into the dark depths of the ocean to fight even more fiercely for your life. Those are the times to walk away from the shore and into the safety of shady solitude, for if not, recovery may not be possible. I wonder at times if that's why I'm so drawn to the ocean, its depth, its mystery, its power, and its beauty mirrors the happenings within my own soul. There's nothing more exhilarating than surfing atop a forceful wave, using my skill and determination to conquer the mighty force and win a battle with something much more powerful, something that has the capacity to whisk me away in an instant and to certain death. At the same time, there's nothing more unnerving than having no fear of the force that, if you allow it, holds your life or death in its grip, allowing it to toss you with its force along with bits of sand and rock and other unknown dangers. This next one is called Slap, and this was written in 2016. I really hope that some of you guys that this can resonate with you and make you feel not so alone. You know, that was one of the worst feelings of everything I went through, is that no one wanted to take the time to understand what was happening with me. And I think it made everything that happened much more brutal and much worse than it would have been had I had support. But I didn't. So this is called Slap. Like many people that are in the public eye, pursuing public careers, my personalities are many. If I'm speaking to a group of foster or adoptive parents, I may be more professional and compassionate. If I'm in front of a camera for the talk show with Jackie, I'm silly, I have fun, I can let the diva adult child out to play. If I'm in an interview, I have the ability to tailor myself to the situation at hand with ease. You know, that first part pretty much sums up how I had to grow up. I had to really size up my parents and the situations, and even in future relationships. I was continually having to figure out which part of me was going to work with them and which part was going to be ridiculed or punished, I guess. However, I have few close friends. People tend to scare me a bit, and I've become much more of an introvert, especially when on the turf of another. I have no problem striking up conversations with strangers. I'll never see them again. I can be my bubbly, happy-go-lucky self, or engage in more intellectual conversations involving any and everything under the sun. My friends, my real friends, on the other hand, are few and carefully chosen. It takes me a while to watch, listen, and see if it's a relationship that's safe or if it's not. Over the years, I've carefully, purposely wrapped my heart and soul heavily with sheaths of tin and barbed wire. There was a misunderstanding with a new friend, and I retreated as usual. She was hurt. It was not my intention, but now I do see I did hurt her. We had a long, deep, involved conversation over the phone, and were able to straighten some things out. Then came a question I had never before been asked. Why do you lie to your friends? What? You heard me, she said. Why do you lie to your friends? From Facebook, it seems all is perfect in your world. And from our conversation, it's not. Why do you lie to us? Once again, I have no idea who I'm talking with or speaking of. I never thought of it that way before, in that particular light. There are very few I let know my personal problems these days, I've learned my lesson the hard way. Also, I hate whiny people that are so negative and complain about everything. Hell, I've even told my therapist I feel badly for letting my problems out on him, and I have to pay him to listen and to advise me. The truth is, I don't want to dwell on negativity. I don't want to be constantly complaining. Yes, I have an extremely complicated and very scary life, but what good would it do to tell the world of the demons I face? It would do nothing more than to make me more afraid and anxious, and it would put an unneeded burden on those I care about. I'm learning how to face those demons, to prioritize, segregate, and work on each of the monsters in the closet one by one. If I need help along the way, there are a few I can bounce ideas off of. And I do have my therapist, not to mention my writing. I've learned the hard way that most people don't want to help. They want fodder for gossip. I won't I won't be a part of their lack of maturity or respect. I'm changing my life with each day for the better and will continue to do so with each breath I take. It was after her startling question I realized I am indeed changing. I'm not lying. I'm learning. I adore you, my friend. You made me think. Wish I could remember her name. All right, this one is titled Kaleidoscope Mind. With each movement, each head turn, each tear that fell, it was as if my world had evolved into a continually rotating kaleidoscope of shapes, colors, and sounds. From each side, more fragmented pieces appeared, and escape did not seem possible. That which seemed real was not. The never ending bombardment of every imaginable shifting thought pushing me further into the spiraling technicolor tube of terror. I could feel the motion of the sea with its tortuous turn. My head was less spinning. Not one cohesive thought could be formed. Each twist of the plot was more devastating than the previous. My eyes stung, my head pounded from the rivers freely drenching my skin, my clothing, and my sheets. As evening crept upon me, the tormenting events had not ceased, and I only saw one way to clear my mind, shake out the poison, and once more see rationally, and that was on my motorcycle. The weather was perfect. The sun had not yet set, the air was warm, and the bike would take every shred of concentration, and that I hoped would quell the sounds, the colors, and the shocks of the day's developments. I exchanged my faded cut-off shorts for a pair of riding jeans, pulled on socks, and my boots. I gathered my blonde locks into several hair ties and headed to the garage to begin what I hoped would be a journey that would bring clarity. As soon as I started the magnificent machine, I continued readying for the ride. I felt the clutter start to settle. I zipped my fringed chaps, put on my helmet, gloves, and riding glasses. With each item, I gained more mental courage. I felt my chest heave with the deep breath I took as I swung my leg over the saddle, and when I stood up the bike, put it in gear, and rolled back the throttle, even more fell into place. I was at home. I was at peace. My spirit was ready to soar. As I wove my way through the gorgeous Oregon countryside, every thought was pushed aside except for those of the beauty of the state in which I reside and how blessed I was to be able to see the amazing handiwork of my Creator. I didn't rush through the ride. I took my time, taking in as much as my mind could hold. The horses grazing, the rolling pastures, the peaked mountains, and the acres and acres of vineyards. Around each corner was something new to behold, and one more thing to push the chaos of the day from my being. I was one with my bike, one with the road, and I found peace within myself. The heaviness of the world had lifted and been replaced with gratitude and thankfulness. I stopped by a quaint little sidewalk cafe and had the most delicious dish of paella with a simple glass of water. I chuckled as I listened to the conversations of those around me and shook my head at the pretentious group to my right. I was going to make it. It amazes me I have a passion that has the ability to alter perceptions, feelings, and thoughts for the better and allow a respite from the never ending conflicts and complications that life can throw out of the blue. For several hours, I was allowed freedom of serious thought, and it was in that time I realized adulthood is just not something in which I want to always participate. Wow. Okay, now I am starting to heal. I can see these are dated like 2017, so I know that healing has started. So this was April. It's called Flawed but Forever Trying. I never stopped writing, observing, and learning. It was not captured by tapping the keys on a keyboard, but rather by making mental notes from analyzing the last 9 years. All that led to my fall, and allowing, sometimes kicking and screaming, myself to look into my soul, see myself for who I am, a flawed human that erratically ran from deeply embedded traumas, and in doing so, gravely damaged those I love most. Did I do it intentionally? Of course not. I would never intentionally hurt the ones whose hearts mean the world to me, but hurt them I did. The wounds run deep and will hopefully heal, allowing restoration of all involved. When I began to fracture, I wasn't running from anyone in particular, but how could anyone believe what I said when they were the ones incinerated as they witnessed the unspeakable actions of the only one they looked to for stability? At that time, I didn't know from what I was running. I only knew I felt as though I was drowning, and my world was imploding. I sought distractions from the pain within my core, but the flames only intensified and the disarray of my thoughts and actions worsened. After the flames destroyed me, and all that I held and still hold dear, I found myself in a pile of ash, scared, alone, and broken. I found myself in exactly the place I believe God intended me to be, so He could build me back into the woman and the mother He had intended me to be all along. After my destruction, I was able to step back and go through the madness to find myself and what was torturing my soul. These past few years have allowed me to walk out of the flames that were burning in the depths of my being and face the immense fear of acknowledging and feeling and dealing with the multiple traumas, purposely hidden events of times long past, and haunting flashbacks that at the time I couldn't piece together. Bit by bit, day by day, sometimes minute by minute, I fought to survive. I, with the help of intense therapy and the loss of all I held dear, forced myself to relive, face, and feel the intense pain I had buried so long ago. This is getting me, guys. I realized that each event I buried, each event I blocked, each event I refused to acknowledge because of fear, it never went away. What it did was build and intensify until I was too weak to continue on, and it took me down without me realizing what or why the fall that destroyed my world occurred. I know now, by the grace of God, the fact that events I had once blocked from my memory, things I chose to bury, that I had allowed Satan's greatest tool, fear, to take not only me, but my family as well into the pits of hell. Today I can honestly say that I fought my way back, not always by myself, but I did the one thing the enemy didn't want me to do. I faced my fears, my shortcomings, my failures, my mistakes, my bad choices, and by doing so, by facing my fears and admitting them, I have allowed my Creator to take the pile of ash I found myself in and mold me into the person He wants me to be. By my choice of ignoring my fears, by not confronting my failures or admitting how very flawed I am, I allowed the downfall of my family to occur. Yes, there were other things that were involved in the mix, but I'm taking responsibility of all I allowed to happen, and I'm taking responsibility for the destruction of my family. Do I regret what happened? I most certainly do. I regret and I mourn for what happened to those I love so very much. For me, what I went through, what I lost, what I learned, I regret nothing, for it taught me more than I could have ever learned had it not happened, and I'm okay with that. I'm peaceful, content, I'm joyful, and I'm so very thankful to serve a God that loves me so much that He alone brought me through those times. He provided what I needed most at the very time I needed it. He placed people in my life that He used to shape me. He brought me home. Should I regain what I lost, the glory will be His. Should I not, I can truthfully say, I, even though saddened, am at peace, knowing for the first time in many years, and that alone is a great testimony to His healing powers. The days of running from my fears are gone. The ability to face them head on is a feeling that is not easily described, but it's amazing. Where I stand today, being able to admit, to see, to face my fear is only by the grace of God, and to Him be the glory. Forever flawed, but trying. This one is called Snow Globe. It will be beautiful once more. As she carefully gathered the shattered shards of the once beautiful snow globe, she realized the correlation between the fragile, beautiful world and her life, both before and after. She had once lived what appeared the perfect life to the ones looking in, yet from inside to her, that perfect life was contained and fragile. As in the past, the music of the snow globe, so beautifully played before its fall, deflected attention from the fissures beginning to manifest in its delicate world. The music began to slow, causing her to tilt the globe and rewind the springs in hopes the gears would continue to turn and the beautiful music would play. Then came the fall that caught all off guard. The globe shattered, and its contents covered the floor. There were sharp edges, broken pieces, devastation, and the contents of the globe were spread wide by the pressure that was released when the impact came. She studied the pieces. Even though broken, they were still stunning. The contents of the globe were shaken and damaged, but their beauty remained. She then noticed the glitter that had once sparkled as it floated freely in the ornamental world had spread across all the damage, and its sparkle was just as brilliant as it had been before the break. It was then she realized that even though her world had disintegrated and sharp edges had caused much harm, the glitter, the sparkle remained. She carefully picked up the pieces and had learned a valuable lesson just as she had in life. She then noticed the foundations of the globe. She gazed at it for a bit and feared because of the crashing fall, if she rewound the gears, that the music might never be heard again. It took time to gather the courage to wind the base. The strength came, and she wound the gears. Several tears fell as the music slowly, haltingly started and then came to an abrupt stop. She waited for a moment and tried once more. The music slowly began, and she held her breath, wondering if it would continue. The music began to fill the room, first in bits and pieces. Then, as it gathered momentum, its beauty returned. Its sound had changed slightly. It was beautiful, although different. Her face lit up with a smile as she realized, even though damaged, her world would once more be filled with beautiful music. Even though the pieces of the globe had spread far apart, the glitter that had been a constant theme was on all of the damaged pieces and would still shine. That gave her the hope she needed to carry on, knowing that all things change, but if given time, they come together stronger and more beautiful than ever before imagined. This was extremely difficult to see, to remember. I haven't titled it, but I think a good title would be, oh, the end. Death was too good for him. As I sat working on the computer, the TV was on. Elizabeth Vargas was interviewing the girls that were by their team doctor. He, well, he got what he deserved, if there is even justice for what he did. Another doctor, however, did not that I know of. While watching the show, feelings of rage, anger, and betrayal bubbled to the surface. Something I can't recall now triggered situations I thought I had dealt with in therapy, and it would never again come up. The doctor my parents sent us to when we were kids was a bit more than friendly with me. It seems I was around 11, possibly younger, when it all began. You see, my parents didn't think things like that happened, especially with a doctor that was also the town's baseball team's doctor. They thought I was safe. What I endured for the next 7 years was nothing short of horrific. I looked him up online. Was he still alive? No, he had died a few months ago. That didn't help. There were stories of what a great man he was. Perhaps he was outside of his office and in public view. I knew the man for what he really was. My feelings were at the boiling point. I wanted to run just like I have most of my life. I've wanted to run from people that I trusted, for they are the ones that are the least suspected. I don't want to use the word hate, possibly disdain, disgust, helplessness, anger, and guilt. Yes, guilt. Reasonably, I know there was nothing I could have done. After all, he was one of the town's most respected doctors. How would anyone believe a little girl or a teenager that I had grown into? I don't know what to feel. My heart is pounding. My head's about to split. I'm fighting off an anxiety attack. And it's if I was back in that examining room, helpless and alone. The memories won't stop no matter how much I medicate myself alone in my room. I'm not alone. I'm haunted by the trusted doctor. He got off easy. Death was far too good for what he deserved. How can people, I don't understand how people can let their kids go in to see a doctor alone, especially in these days. And I think I'm going to end with this one here called I Saw a Woman. I may do another one of these. If you want, just drop it in the comments and let me know. I saw a woman. Okay. This was very recent, well, within the last couple of years. I saw a woman. As I wiped steam from the bathroom mirror, the reflection of her eyes took me by surprise. Big, brown, familiar, yet not. I stood staring as the air cleared. Slowly the cloak covering the mirror vanished, as did the way she once saw herself. I could see the woman in front of me, wet and renewed, not only from the morning's cleansing, but also from breaking free from the cocoon in which she had once been encased. I was mesmerized as I watched the droplets of water fall from her body, taking with him the fear that she had before tightly gripped. Wet tresses of blonde mixed with platinum framed her face. I paused as I stared, and for the first time in ages I saw the essence of the one whose reflection I studied. I looked at the outward scars, the ink on her arms covered. In them I saw the evidence of battles she had fought and she had won. Within her, I knew the scars left on her heart were being healed. She stood there naked, without makeup, with ringlets of wet hair, and I saw a beauty I had never before seen in her. I saw a radiance that comes with being comfortable in one's own skin. I saw a woman with no need for affirmation, for she had fought the war and she had survived. You know, one thing I really realized when I was looking and reading these back right now is how journaling helped me deflect a lot of the pain and make it real. It also, in looking back on it, it allowed me to see how far I've come from those days that were so hard and so dark and so alone. You know, I thought I got good therapists, I got a good psychiatrist, I have good boundaries. I educated myself, I have self compassion now. You know, in reading the journals, I could see something that I really had never fully seen in myself before, and that was the strength. I don't think anyone without strength could have survived what I had gone through. You know, when I read those, it it kind of gives me a mental picture of trying to climb a mountain through the fog. You don't realize how far you've gone until you get there. If you're listening to this and you're in the middle of your own storm, I want you to remember something. The person you are today is not the same one you will always be. Pain convinces us that nothing will ever change. My journals prove otherwise. They show a woman who thought she was losing everything. They also show a woman who never stopped fighting. If you can't see the sun today, keep going. Sometimes the clouds part so slowly that you don't notice until one day you realize you're standing in the light again. Climb the mountain, people. You'll get to the top. Keep a journal so you can see how far you've come. I think you probably saw how hard it was for me to read some of those. It's almost as if I was reliving them, but you know what? I didn't panic. My heart didn't race. I didn't feel the need to run. It was hard to get through, but I did. And I think the more that I do that, the easier it'll be. And like I said, if you're going through a storm, it won't always be there. You will not always be the same person. There's a brighter day ahead. If you want to hear more like this, let me know. I'll be more than glad to share. And keep your journals, keep your writings as sacred. So one day you can look back and see how far you've come. Thanks for staying around, and I will see you guys pretty soon.